Hello and welcome to Identirati Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue. Today is episode 171. The topic today is an update on Phil's book, Dynamic Authorization from Manning, available for MEEP. So, Phil, welcome
Thank you.
and
Good to be here.
congratulations on the progress. I hear 14 chapters in the book now.
That have been released. More in the queue, going through the process to be released. So
I think I have my plane reading now um, settled for my trip out to
for your
Mossab
trip,
Connect in
yeah.
Morocco next week.
Well, let me know what you think.
Yeah, it might be the topic for another episode. Um, so right now you mentioned that the next chapter, so 14 chapters are out. The last chapter was policy governance,
Yeah,
which we might need to do a follow-up episode on because maybe GovOps might change your mind about what governance should look like.
it could. It could.
But right now, you're working on chapters titled things like AI and policy and authorization in agentic AI,
Yeah.
um, which I feel like is the topic of every other or 2 out of 3 IOH episodes these days.
Yeah. It's hard to get away from. It's kind of like the internet in 1996, right? I mean, everybody wanted to talk about it.
Yeah. So you've written some articles. I've linked a bunch of them in the episode notes. Let me just put up that link. So it's IOH-171 unexpectedly, and not surprisingly. Um, and there's more good ones on the side, so you can scroll and see some of Phil's other writings. Um, but I just wanted to, these episodes aren't that long, so we can't really talk about um, that much. So I wanted to focus on the article that was titled "Why Authorization is the Hard Problem in Agentic AI." And if I could, I'll start with this question, which I ask a lot of people, but I just want to hear your take on it. What fundamentally changes about authorization when AI becomes agentic instead of just a request-driven service?
Yeah. So there's actually a couple of dimensions that are interesting to look at with respect to your question. I mean, one dimension is how have we typically approached authorization? Not necessarily what capabilities are available, because we've got lots of authorization systems that many companies don't use, right? But one of the most popular ways of approaching authorization in many companies is role-based access control, which you're well aware is the idea that we um, figure out what roles um, exist in a company, and then we assign people to roles, and we assign permissions to those roles. And now, if I can identify that Mike has role product manager, that means that he can have access to these documents or these systems or whatever, right? Um, so that's one dimension that we've approached authorization that breaks down in an agentic world, right? And the reason it breaks down is because even well, for a couple of things. One, agents aren't likely to have long-lasting roles, and two, there's a level of trust we put in humans that I don't think we're ready to put in AI agents yet. Maybe never will be willing to put in AI agents. If I say Mike's a product manager and I've hired you, and I mean you have access to lots of stuff in my company, and I'm giving you some trust, right? I mean, trust, just to be clear, involves an element of risk. If there's no risk, you don't need trust, right? And so companies trust employees to behave, and there are things that they do if employees don't behave. We shouldn't be trusting AI agents to behave because they don't have any sense of, what's right and wrong. They're just trying to achieve a goal. So that's one dimension that we have to take into account. Um, excuse me. The other dimension that we have to take into account is that we have typically approached authorization, even if we get past the role-based access control model and say, okay, we're going to use policies and context and all kinds of other things. We've typically approached authorization as somebody makes a request and we evaluate that request, right? Principle, action, resource, context, the park model, and we say, okay, this request should be permitted or this request should be denied, and then we're done. But in fact, AI agents will be taking action after action after action in accordance with some plan. They might replan based on what outcomes happen. You don't want to have a single shot standing authority kind of permit decision at the start of this process and then just let the AI go off and do what they need to do. What you want to do is you want to be continually authorizing, basically every action that the AI agent takes. Now, this is not too different than where we're going with zero trust in the human world. In the sense that we want to continually authorize actions. But that's something that many systems aren't set up to do, and many companies aren't thinking about. We have to be continually authorizing every single action that an AI agent's going to take. Now, I said there were two dimensions, but actually there's a third one that just occurred to me that we probably ought to mention too, and that is delegation. An AI agent is presumably working as a delegate of some person who has some kind of authority, right? And that person is going to delegate a task to the AI agent and the necessary authority, hopefully limited to just the necessary authority for that agent to carry out that task. But agents don't just work all by themselves. Many agents have sub-agents. And so you can imagine a long delegate chain where human delegates to agent A. Agent A says, oh, I've got a subtask. I'm going to delegate that to agent B. And then that agent even says, oh, I've got a subtask of my subtask. I'm going to delegate that to agent C. How does the authority flow through that? Does agent C have all the authority that agent A had, or some derivation of that? How do we manage that? I mean, these are all hard questions. I'm not saying I have answers. I'm just saying I have questions.
Yeah. So actually, I don't want to take on delegation. I wrote down my other
No,
question because as I
that,
was
yeah,
listening to you on
we could spend the
delegation,
whole thing
I was
talking
like,
about.
I'm going to forget the first question as I think through delegation. Um, but I wanted to go back to what you said about how we have to authorize everything that the agent is doing. And, I've been thinking about this, and Rohit Kare and I were talking yesterday about how actually there's no authorization engine in humans. And we have all of these systems with humans to hold them accountable after the fact. So we have laws, we have morals, we have ethics, we have best practices, we have norms, um, and so and if people transgress any of those, then there could be various sanctions that we put in place to try and create the right incentives for people.
Right.
Now, don't we need
That goes to my
so
point
don't we
about
need a similar approach for agents where we say we're not going to prevent them from doing anything, but we're going to hold them accountable and observe them?
yeah. So I think there are a couple of problems that I see with that. Um, and this sounds like it could be a really interesting, long discussion, especially if Rohit was involved. But um, the so first off, I don't want to get off on this topic because we could spend a whole episode talking about it. But I recently read a book called If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. And basically, the premise of the book is if we get to the point where we have built artificial general intelligence, that artificial general intelligence will ultimately result in the end of the human race. Now, we could debate that. There's lots of discussions. These are not just random folks. These are people who know AI pretty well. I could not refute most of their arguments. I mean, but the reason I bring it up is because they have some very good chapters in their book about why, even with the most careful prompting and even with the most restricted goals, it's unlikely we can predict what an AI agent that does not have our, I mean, we use the word conscience, right? Ethics, whatever word you want to use, does not have that same ethical foundation that humans seem to have just innately in some sense. There's no telling what it's going to do, and we can't stop it from doing that. Now, like I said, I don't want to get off on that topic.
Honestly, there's no telling what a human's going to do either. Humans themselves are pretty unpredictable.
Yeah, but and I think that's kind of the point. Is their point is that AGI. I mean, we're not talking about like LLMs, right? I mean, they're talking about some future general intelligence that it is going to be even more unpredictable than humans, because at least with humans, most people kind of know it's wrong to murder somebody. And for most of us, we try to avoid that. Doesn't mean every human does, but we have this kind of feeling. And this goes to what I was saying earlier about employees, right? That we trust employees to do certain things. Why can we trust employees to do those things? And so I would ask, not I don't have an answer, but I would ask in response to this discussion with Rohit is how can we know, right? How can we trust an AI agent to do the right thing generally? And even if we catch it doing something wrong and then go back and fix it, there are some things where that's just too late, right? I mean, it's already sent the email with the company, board financials to the Wall Street Journal because somehow it figured out that that was going to help it achieve its goal that you gave it. I mean, you can't pull that back. You can't undo that action. And so I think the idea that we would, just monitor AI agents and then
Sanction them.
sanction them. I mean, why do they care about sanctions? I mean, this goes to, they're not us, right? They don't care about sanctions. What are we going to do? We're going to turn it off. Okay. I mean, I don't know.
Okay, so let me put a pin in that for 1 second and say, you can't sanction a piece of software. You can't punish a piece of software. However, it doesn't mean you can't hold the organization, business unit, or people who made this wrong policy accountable and identify them. So I don't think because
Sure.
we can't
But
punish
but
that
that
we
just
can't have
pushes
accountability.
but that just pushes the can down the road, right? In the sense that, okay, we're going to hold the organization accountable. How's the organization going to ensure, how's it going to manage its risk? Well, it's going to do it with some sort of authorization, right? I mean, that's really the only answer we have, is to build authorization into the agents and try to control them through some kind of policy, what they can do and what they can't do. I mean, I agree we can hold organizations accountable, but if I'm in that organization, I want to minimize my risk. I'm not just going to hope the thing I built doesn't, well, some companies might, but most companies are just going to hope that the thing they build is going to do the right thing. They're going to try to make sure that happens. And how are they going to do it? Well, you can use authorization, because trying to do it through prompts is the wrong answer.
Um, and so, okay. So you want some type of strong guardrails. You're like, I don't trust this AI agent. I want to set down these rules, and I want these strong guardrails to know that the agent will always be within these guardrails. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I went back to I gave the example of the, AI agent emailing the board financials to a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. That may sound facetious, but it's not completely facetious. I mean, it's possible that that could happen. So how do we control that? Well, I mean, you could imagine that there's a policy agent that before the AI can use a particular tool, say the email tool, it looks, who's the principal? Well, it's this agent. What's the action? Email. What's the resource? The attachments and the to address, and the content of the email could be resources. And now what, and then context, which includes, what authority was delegated to this agent. And, that's how we decide. I mean, I don't
Well,
know.
let me challenge you a little bit on that.
Sure.
You mentioned that agents might do anything. Like that's it. Like I said, humans are unpredictable. You said agents could be even more unpredictable. But if it's those are both infinite things, so I don't know how you could be more infinite. Um, but this is exactly the problem, which is the list of things that you shouldn't do is infinite. And so how would we know to have a policy that says don't email, our company financials to the Wall Street Journal? Um, you have to figure out, you have to sort of iterate through or have some type of strategy for how you're going to know that you iterated through all the things that you needed to do in order to really get an assurance that these guardrails make sense.
Yeah. So that's a good question. And I think that um, we can't iterate through all the things that we want to say AI agents shouldn't do. What we have to do is be very careful in the list of things we allow them to do. So in the case of email, an agent that can send email, where can it send email to, right? It can send certain kinds of resources to email within the company. I mean, you're never going to get this, as granular as you want it, but you can certainly do a lot better than just, we're going to let this agent email anything to anybody and, just hope that our prompting gives it enough context that it figures things out. And that's, that going back to the human. I mean, if you hire, I mean, you've got a company, I don't have a company anymore, but, you hire an intern, um, you are going to restrict the things that that intern has access to, or you're probably not going to give interns access to board financials. But let's say the intern had a job where they had to have access to that. You would probably give them specific instructions, right? So we see risk and we try to mitigate.
Hmm. Oh no. Oh no, I lost my guest.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
we're
back.
back
I'm
on.
back. Yeah. So I was saying, I'm not claiming that we can build some sort of all-encompassing policy set that can keep every bad thing from happening. But we can do the same kinds of things we do when we hire a human employee, right? I mean, I was talking about an intern, right? You hire an intern, you're probably not going to give your intern access to board level financials. But if they have a job where they need that, you'd probably recognize, oh, there's some risks. They may not understand the sensitivity of these documents. Let me talk to them about it. Same kind of thing, right? We can create policies that help us manage that kind of risk. But yeah, I mean, guardrails, we're never going to have them perfect. There are going to be mistakes, but we can't just say, oh, let's watch what they do and hold them accountable. And we can't just like give them roles and hope that they behave accordingly. I mean, we have to do more than that.
That would be abdication, in fact, if we just decided, oh, we're not going to worry about it. That's
Yeah.
basically has a word. Um, I was talking. The first live stream this year was with Bob Blakely, um, and he mentioned that assuming that what you say is correct, that we need these strong guardrails, that it sort of implies that the scope of agents, let's say, capabilities will need to be small. So a really broad scope, like running a business, is that all sort of like craziness and hilarity will ensue, but maybe a smaller capability, like send monthly reports to the executive team. That type of thing is will be scoped enough so that we can put actual guardrails on it. So my question for you is like, what should be our expectations about the scope of these agents' responsibility? And maybe we're worried about nothing because most of the agents will be very narrowly scoped.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if you've played with OpenClaw, formerly ClaudeBot, um, at all, or even read any of the things, right? It's the sensation of the week.
Mhm.
Last week, maybe there's a new sensation this week. I'm not sure, but anyway, the idea is this is like a personal assistant that you, um, and there have been people who have like, oh, I'll just give it access to all my email, and then see what happens. And I
Yeah,
think,
the prospect of letting a browser extension impersonate me with any type of with a lack of like scope
yeah,
in terms of its capabilities would be utterly terrifying to me,
exactly.
honestly.
Exactly. And so I think while we can all get excited about, oh, I'm going to have a personal assistant that just can take care of all of these little details in my life. I mean, that excites almost anybody, right? We all hate having to deal with all those details. But yeah, I'm much more um, circumspect in terms of trying to figure out what I want it to be attached to and how I want it. Let's give it its own email account, not my email account. Let's do things that, like you say, can kind of limit its scope and maybe the blast radius of any potential problems. But yeah, I think that's absolutely right. We need to start off small, and that's where policies can help, right? I mean, we can do things like put in a policy that says if the action is email and the resource looks like this, only these addresses are allowed. Is it a pain to have to do that? Yeah, it's a pain to have to do that. But the alternative is you just turn it loose and hope for the best. I mean, so,
Yeah, so I play a bit of speed chess, and in chess, when you play a computer, they normally have an opening book. So the first couple of moves, they sort of know all the possible combinations and they can just
yeah,
respond. But then you get into analysis phase where after like 7 or 8 moves, the combinations are way too much and they need to start looking at the board and analyzing. And I wonder if there is perhaps an analogy here where the things that we can predict and make policies about are the equivalent of the opening book. It's all the things that we could have foreseen that we make policies about. And then at a certain point, the agent hits this where, oh, there is no policy about this. And now I really need to process and understand, um, whether I should do this action on this resource, which I maybe can do, but should I do it? Um,
yeah.
and that's where I think people are conflating those two parts of the analysis.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy. As you're talking about the analysis phase, one of the things you said, oh, the agent would think, oh, should I do this? Can I do this? One of the ways we deal with this in um, with people, right, is we have things like multi-sig or um, you know just-in-time permissioning. if I'm a relatively new engineer and I want to deploy to production, I don't just have standing authority to deploy to production, but I can get my boss to give me authority for this time to do something, right? And that's the kind of thing that I think we'll end up doing a lot with agents is they'll have some standing authority to do things, right? You can send email to these addresses, but if the agent decides, oh, I really need to send this document to this, it's going to have to ask, right? And a human's going to have to say, yeah, and that's going to result in some delegation of authority that then is time bound, scoped, and allows the agent to proceed. So I think we're going to end up with, it's going to be more like supervising 5-year-olds than it is going to be like supervising college students. Um,
You have a little bit of experience at both, so
both.
you know. Um, I want to go back to we started this conversation talking a little bit about role-based access control and how that model for thinking about security is maybe not sufficient for the complexity of challenges and policies that we need to make. Um, and yet, later in the conversation, when you actually give an example, you use an identity-based example where you said, should this intern be able to do these actions? And so I see this a lot where we sort of recognize that this identity-based system doesn't work, but then our default mode is always to think about access control in terms of human access control.
Yeah.
Um, and so let me take this a little bit further and say, okay, so actually, it's not humans. It's really the software is using tokens that are providing assertions from other systems that it trusts in order to derive the identity of the person and decide what actions to take. Um, and one of the conversations I hear is those tokens um, um, sort of provide the basis for the decision, and sort of a discomfort with sort of this friction of human identity with the authorization decision. I don't know if that's a question, but maybe
Um,
bounce off for a second.
yeah. So to be so that we're clear, especially for the audience, when you're say tokens, you're talking about like jots, signed jots, not the tokenization of
Correct.
human language that an AI agent would use to create a plan, right? So just so
Right.
we're clear about what we're talking about.
And not Bitcoin tokens or other
Yeah,
types
yeah,
of
yeah.
tokens. Yeah, I'm talking about identity assertions issued by a trusted issuer for the purpose of
Yeah,
identifying a human or a piece of
I
software.
think that the idea of tokens is perhaps too broad for the distinctions we want to make, in the sense that there are some tokens that are bearer tokens and just assert an identity, and then everything is downstream from that, right? After you they have an identity and then some authorization for a set of APIs. I mean, I'm thinking specifically about OAuth tokens, for example, in that case, right? And so everything's contained within the token. Anybody who has the token can do whatever the token says they can do. Done. Whereas there's other kinds of tokens. Like it's a jot that has attributes in it, and those attributes represent various things about this. In the case of an AI agent, they might represent specific authorizations or specific authority that's been delegated. And so now the token is the basis for the context in an authorization decision. Um, and so
It's input to policy, isn't it?
input to policy, right? It's not standing authority, right? So some tokens represent standing authority. If you've got this token, you can do these things.
But that's only on the basis of a policy, right? So one distinction that I've been making is that we want the policies in some type of dynamic authorization engine. Um, if I have a API gateway and it hard codes that this scope allows this, or it has some other type of one-off mapping, then that policy really becomes baked into the piece of infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's not just that we want that the token represents the right to do something, but the token represents the right to do something because of a dynamic policy engine that we can trust making auditable decisions.
Yeah. And that's really the distinction I think we need to be making, right? Is that we have to get away from bearer tokens that have standing authority and to tokens like you're talking about that contain information, context, fed into a policy engine, which then evaluates against policy and makes decisions about whether access is allowed or not.
Um, and so the place where delegation gets complicated, and I'll use my props here. I have I have the agent. Um, this is the busy beaver, and I have my MCP server. It's cold because it's in the data center. Um, And there, so people say the agent, but we actually have an agent here that's, running on your phone doing stuff. And then it's calling MCP servers, which are doing stuff. And those MCP servers might be calling LLMs, or the agent might be calling LLMs for decision. And so, well, the agent is connected to the person, right? Because so this is me, I'm connected to it. So I somehow authenticate myself and connect to give this. So now this has a token. Now this token gets sent over here to now he has a token that says there's an agent out somewhere there and that's connected to Mike. And it talks to another MCP server. I'm running out of like stuffed animals, but
Yeah.
you get the question
Sure.
of like as this token sort of traverses domain boundaries and goes from one domain to another domain, the issuer, the trust model starts to become difficult. First of all, do I even trust this token? Which claims of the token do I trust? What values map? And how can I give the assurances of security to the agent and the MCP servers? And this is where it seems to get really complicated.
So I'm not going to claim that I've worked out all of the problems or even or especially all of the tech, but I think the idea in this scenario that we're going to have a token that gets passed around is not the right mental model. I mean, the person is, let's say that the person creates a token that represents a delegation to your Busy Beaver agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
That Busy Beaver agent wants to do something, right? MCP servers, probably has an OAuth token for the MCP server, which is a bearer token, right? So it
Well,
might,
there's a communication between, these guys, yes, the agent probably needs to, the agent has its own identity and it needs to connect to a certain API here. And that API is probably OAuth protected. So yeah, I think you're right. These guys have a trusted connection. They know who each other
yeah,
are.
yeah. But even if they didn't, right, the agent, the Busy Beaver, shouldn't be just passing along your token. It should be creating a new token for the next agent that represents some scoped authority based on what scoped authority it had. So it can never be bigger than what authority it had. Maybe it's going to be the whole scope, right? Maybe that's appropriate, but it should be. We should be building agents that are authorizing subagents with some scoping as well. Now, how that happens, I don't know. These would be great IIW discussions.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, I think the agent might very well pass the tokens. It might say, I have authenticated a human. Here's the evidence that I did that. And this human authenticated with a FIDO token, a FIDO2 token, not a FIDO U2F token. So I can show here's an attestation about the authenticator that was used, because that might be important input to policy. Because Mr. MCP server might say, oh, how do I know that you're actually talking to that person? And how do I know that you sufficiently authenticated and proved user presence? So it might need attestations or JW from the agent about how that happened, in order to create the trust that enables it to go and do what it's going to do. So, but I think you're onto something about how it's not going to be one token. Um, but at the same time, we have transaction tokens. So Signal has been, Tool and others have been advocating for a new model where we use a token, we do token exchange, because one of the challenges with tokens is it's hard to transitively convey that the token was not stolen. So one of the strategies that we use is at every hop, at every domain boundary hop, we do a token exchange for a new token. So I think actually, I joke that we don't have the agent identity infrastructure. Um, we don't have the tokens that we need to issue to agents. Um, we don't have the flows under which we create those tokens. Um, and we can't make policies about tokens, and we can't govern those policies. So I think that my assessment of the current state is that none of the infrastructure exists. Um,
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think you're right that we have a green field ahead of us, right? If we're being optimistic in terms of the problems that we're facing. But yeah, these are unlike problems we have faced before, right? We have not we can't use bearer tokens to solve this problem. We need something new. What that something new is, I don't have complete answers. I've got ideas. You've got ideas. Sounds like a tool has ideas. We need to all talk.
yeah. Um, And let me get your quick take. You worked on the Cedar team before endeavoring to write yet another book, which is, I'm sure, going to be a classic. Um, but I wanted to query you a little bit about Cedar. I think that Cedar recently got contributed officially to CNCF. um, I hope that they have a good showing at KubeCon this year. Now that they're officially in CNCF, last KubeCon they had just barely gotten in or gotten approved. They really didn't have any time to plan. I'm curious if you've thought or you have any insights into where is Cedar right now. Are you and maybe also what could Cedar be doing better to help get the word out more about how important an innovation Cedar is in authorization?
Yeah. So, I guess my first point would be that I have even when I was at AWS, I had very little to do with Cedar in terms of its open source project status and all of those things. Right? Those were all. Those were something different than where we were. But so I'm not speaking with any kind of authority here.
Right.
But
But you are in the Cedar community as an end user, as somebody who writes about and gives examples in Cedar.
I
You're a valued voice in
yeah,
helping us
I
understand
chose
Cedar.
Cedar as the primary language for dynamic authorization. My book because to I wanted to have something concrete, and I guess practically I was very familiar with Cedar, but also I think more than that, it's very general purpose, right? In terms of you can do relationship based access control, you can do policy based access control, you can do attribute, you can do all of these things, right? So it's very flexible in no sense. um, I think that there are I don't have like a long list of things that I think Cedar needs to do in order to be better accepted in terms of technology. I think a lot of the things that they've already done have gotten them, to where it's a very capable system. One of the things that is still in beta, but I think is very important, especially in the world of AI, is you know the typed partial evaluation, TPE. If you just install the Cedar engine, you don't get that. You have to actually turn on a flag to get it. But partial evaluation allows you to give just some of the parts of a request and then get essentially what's called a policy residual. It's essentially what's left over in the policy after all of the things that you've given it have been applied. And that's very interesting for things like retrieval augmented generation systems and other kinds of AI systems. So I think those kinds of things are very applicable, and the Cedar team works hard to make sure that those are all out there. It's probably you probably are more familiar with this than I am because this is kind of your business, but I think there's a good set of clients for building the policy enforcement point. Things like Cedar Local Agent, Cedarling, Cedar Agent, which is different than Cedar Local Agent. I mean, all of these things make it easier for people to use Cedar, which I think
AVP, of course.
Yeah, AVP. I think all of these things make it easier for people to use Cedar, which is important. Um, because it's one thing to say, yeah, you need policy-based access control, and oh, here's this great system, Cedar, and yeah, your engineers will have to spend the next 4 months building, your decision point into, your software before you can actually use it, and so a lot of the, side projects. I don't mean that pejoratively. I just mean, the projects surrounding Cedar are making that a lot easier. There's good support for Rust and Go and NPM at this point. So I think all of those things are very positive developments. I think that outside of Cedar, there's, Cedar faces a problem that isn't really a Cedar problem, and that is that there are still lots of organizations that just don't understand that they need policy-based access control, right? Like we talked about at the very start of this, most companies are still kind of satisfied with role-based access control, and that's doing the job for them. They've still got their firewall, and yeah, it's got some holes in it, but they're limping along. And yeah, I think there's a kind of an infrastructure and mindset upgrade that organizations need to make in order to get past this role-based access control firewall world and into a policy-based access control continuous authorization world. And that's not easy, right? It requires organizational commitment, it requires retooling, it requires lots of things. So, that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. Because I realized, maybe 3, maybe 4 IIWs ago that everybody was, talking about authentication as a more or less solved problem, at least from a technical standpoint, right? That we weren't going to get a lot better than passkeys in terms of just transmitting the, identifier to someone so that they could.
And VCs from wallets.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was the area that people were thinking was interesting and useful? And it turns out that authorization is one of those areas, because we still have lots of companies, organizations that need to spend more time thinking about authorization. So that's why I decided to write the book. That's what the book is really aimed at. I think you've seen some of the early access chapters. One of the things that I do in the book is I have a fictional company, Acme Corp, of course. And, people inside Acme Corp, Alice, the engineer, and Carol, the manager, Kate, the customer, and those kinds of things who try to make it real, right? To help people understand, here's how you might approach it in a company. Here's what might force you to be thinking about zero trust, and if you did, what could you do about it? What are the things that what are the steps you could take as this organization? So, I think these stories about, Acme Corp and the people in Acme Corp and how they're using authorization to solve their problems, they're meant to help people see that, authorization is not some, esoteric subject, but it's something that can help them solve real problems in their company right now.
So Phil, I think I mentioned to you this to you on LinkedIn, but I know not all of us are as addicted to LinkedIn as I am. Um, but we're actually, so for the Cedarling, we're switching our examples to your book as examples, because writing good examples is actually really hard. Um, and we also figure it'll be synergistic with the book anyway.
Yeah.
So one of
Well,
the
I'm
things,
happy to hear that. I'm happy to hear that they've been useful already.
yeah, I had Jake Mashenko, the founder of Authzed, on Tuesday,
Hmm.
and he mentioned one of the things that he found about Cedar was that the examples were bad. The Hello World examples were not great on the Cedar policy website,
Mm.
and that turned him off as a developer. Um, and so I think actually writing better examples is a real service to what we need as a community.
Yeah,
So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
that's a good point. Yeah.
Um, and now I'll complain a little bit because that human-based framework is really important. But I feel like a lot of the challenges around authorization are about infrastructure. Should this system or this piece of this Kubernetes cluster or this piece of infrastructure be able to interact with this infrastructure under this context? Um, and then in the agentic software to software, should this agent be able to call this MCP server? Or just I think we need some more examples too that use non-human centric. I know we love to make ourselves the middle. I think we need to think about or more like what are some of the use cases that flush out organizational and software trust also.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, one of the things that I'm trying to do right now is do a series of blog posts. We've been talking about the first one on. Yeah, I like how you say the software to software authorization problem, and excuse me, excuse me. And so that's what I'm doing right now is trying to figure out that whole topic by writing blog posts about it. So I've got some blog posts that I've kind of teed up in this world about um, what delegation means and what are multi-agent chains, and I don't know exactly what they're going to say yet, but these are all topics that I'm trying to explore because you know I like to tell people I write my blog for me. If someone else finds it, well, that's good. But
Right.
I learned by writing about things, so that's what I'm doing right now is trying to figure all of this out in my blog.
Yeah, I would say I'm doing the same with some of these topics. And in a way, there's been a new renaissance of blogs because everyone has the world's best research assistant at their disposal these days to help with that. Um, yeah, well, I guess that's a good place to hit pause. We're a little over on this episode actually already. Did you want any share any last thoughts, IIW reminders, or other such content? Let me give you a second to make sure you make all your announcements.
Well, just if you're in the world of identity and specifically if you're building things, you know, IIW is a great place, and the discussions right now are all about the things we've been talking about. Authorization, a lot of decentralized identity, um, the whole idea of AI agents, and we've got agentic internet workshop happening the day after IIW again this time. So yeah, please come to IIW and join the discussion. It's an unconference, so if you've got things to talk about, you're welcome to talk.
Awesome, and that is coming up at the end of April.
Yeah, last week of April.
I'll put a link in the episode notes, just for anyone who doesn't know about it. I normally announce the next episode, but next week I'm off. I'm actually recording 2 episodes live with I'll be at MOSIP Connect. MOSIP is a citizen identity platform, and they have a conference every year in different remote locations. This year it's in Morocco. Kalia is also attending and I think helping to run the unconference. We're recording 2 episodes live, which I'll broadcast next week, but I don't want to do them live because it's too much pressure. Um, so we're off next week, no content. And with that, I'll say thank you, Phil. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show
It's
again.
been a fun discussion. I appreciate you having me on.
And hopefully we'll see you all at IAW in April.